What's up, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I have a special guest, Coach Laolagi, with us. She has been a coach for over 20 plus years with experience at Harvard Westlake as an assistant, Chaminade, Buckley, Shalhevet, and has also been a head coach at Calabasas High School for the girls program and is now the current head coach at Notre Dame High School. So thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. Did a good job with the pronunciation as well.
Trying. It only took like 4 times, but we're here.
It usually takes more.
I know, we're here. But no, thank you for coming today. I want to talk a little bit just about your journey coaching. Talk to me about how you started, what interests you about getting into coaching and now being in it for 20 plus years. Tell me about some of your journey.
Sure. So I actually started coaching when I was 16. Just started as coaching at the local rec center. The younger sister is a couple of years younger, so I was coaching her team, and it was just fun. It was fun to work with girls and be able to, do something that I enjoyed and kind of share it with the girls. And so from there, started a club team when I was 19 and just in college. And did that, and it was just something that I loved and enjoyed and continued doing and growing. And one of the things I love about the game is that you're never done learning. And so sometimes I look back and like, I wish I knew then what I know now, but it's all part of the journey.
Right. Well, talk to me about what has been the biggest area or place that you think that you've grown as a coach within the last 20 years of your coaching?
Oh, that's a big question. Biggest area I've grown is just being adaptable. The game has changed from when I started coaching at 16 and to where it is now. Back in high school, I was a center, power forward, and we don't have really true centers anymore. So that's something that's completely changed the game, right? The 3-point shot, the consistency of the 3-point shot has changed. So we moved a lot more to positionless basketball, but also understanding that, maybe it's a little more free flowing, but we still got spots. We still got to be great where we're good at.
Totally. What do you think for you has been the biggest, you mentioned sort of being able to adapt. So what do you think has been the biggest adaptation for you at going to different programs, coaching different programs, being at the, JV level, at the varsity level? What have you sort of adapted most to, other than, what you just mentioned of the positionless part of the game?
So I think for me, I coach my team, or the way I structure my team and our offenses is based on what I have, right? Like I might like to play a faster tempo game, but if my team is not there, I've got to adapt to what they can do and what their strengths are. So I'm very big on strength-based coaching. So I like to look at, what are you good at? Let's be really great at what you're good at, as opposed to trying to do something just because everybody's shooting threes. Like, maybe that's not your strength. If you're good in the mid-range, let's get there. Let's get to those spots. So even just with my team right now, the way we looked my first year was completely different than the way we looked this past season, the way we're going to look moving forward. And it's always being adaptable to them and being able to coach them. So I might run a couple sets that are similar to what we've run before, but if it doesn't work for the group that I have, I'm as stubborn as I might be in my own personal life, I'm not as a coach. So we might scrap it and do something else.
I love that you mentioned the playing to the strength of your team. I can kind of relate to this a little bit because when I was working with the Lakers, we would host draft workouts. And so I got to be a part of that experience. And one of the things that the coaches would reiterate is, we're bringing you in here to see what you can do well, not what you've been working on, with your trainer the past 2 months to prepare for this workout. And so I think that's to your point, like understanding strengths and being able to coach to those strengths, I think is a huge part of success. And I think, kind of goes to why you've had so much success as a coach already.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So you've been at Notre Dame now for the last 2 years. How has that experience been? What have you learned throughout the last couple years being there? And what are sort of your goals for the upcoming season for your team?
I've loved it there. And it's funny, I went to Birmingham High School and I grew up in the Valley. A lot of my best friends went and played at Notre Dame.
So you're right at home.
Exactly. So it feels like I was there, in the
Right.
stands. And so now I might be on the sideline. So it feels good to be back. And what I loved immediately walking on the campus is the community that they have. And it's very family-based and community-oriented. And our administrative support is so strong. So even just bringing me in and bringing in someone different than someone that had been there for quite a while and did a great job. They wanted something else. And so they've been extremely supportive about the direction of the program. And yes, we want to win. It's not like win, 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 and that's all, you're not valuable if you don't. It's really just stepping onto campus and being able to be a part of the community that they've already built.
That's really cool. And it sounds like you feel right at home there.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a really good fit for you.
It's awesome.
When you speak about, your program and obviously wanting to build and develop that program, do you have both JV and Frosh-Soft teams? And with those teams, what are your goals for those levels?
So for the lower levels, the past 2 years I did have a Frosh team and a JV team. Like we had 33 girls in the program last year, which is crazy, right? Because
it's a lot of kids.
Unfortunately, the Frosh-Soft freshman level, it has been dying down. However, I always look at it, I want all the girls in my program to have a great experience. And so at the lower levels, we're really focusing on, obviously, the fundamentals, enjoying the game, and just getting better, hopefully for the next level. It's not for everybody, right? Not everybody continues on, whether it be their own reasons, maybe they find something else that they really enjoy. But it really is preparing them for the varsity level. And then at the varsity level, we're obviously preparing them beyond if that's the direction they want to go.
Yeah. One of the questions I asked Ryan this, but I'm really interested because you worked with Ryan, who's over at Chalhevet. What do you look for in your coaching staff, especially the coaches that are coaching your JV and your Frosh-Soft levels?
So big thing is I never want to or think that I'm the smartest person in the room. And so I make sure to surround myself by people with different experiences, different backgrounds, but also have different strengths and weaknesses than I do. So I don't need a bunch of me's. That to me is just, I don't need yes people around me. I need people that are really good at other things so I can lean on them. And that's how I also grow and get better. And it's the same with them. So definitely surrounding myself with people that have those different strengths, as well as, having people that are, that girls can connect to, right? So I try my best to connect to everybody, but sometimes it might feel hard to come to me for whatever reason. So you go to Coach Nat or Coach Camille or Coach Alexis, for example, because they have different temperaments and different ways they go about things. And I feel like as coaches, we all say the same thing, just in a different way. And so I'll even bring in guest coaches to just, do their thing. And again, we're saying the same things, but it might connect to you better than the girl next to you, even though I'm saying it every single day.
Right.
Sometimes it just goes in one ear out the other.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I think a lot of times head coaches can be threatened by having bigger or different personalities than their own. But I think to your point, the reason that you've had a lot of success is because you surround yourself with people that challenge your thinking, that offer different insights, can relate in different ways, and I think that speaks to just who you are as a person and as a coach as well. So that's really cool for me, and just to watch as somebody that respects and admires you as well.
Thank you.
But speaking of that, so you've coached at different places. You've won a championship at Chalhevet, being a part of their staff. You've had success at Calabasas as well. What do you think the number one ingredient to the success that you've had is for those teams?
Culture. So one of the things that just I love in terms of a challenge is coming in and creating something and creating a culture of positive energy. And at Calabasas, some of the girls weren't used to winning, some of the girls that I inherited. And so that was something that we had to turn that mindset around where, they weren't used to that. Or even at Notre Dame, my first year, they had been beat by teams over and over again in league. And I we had games we could have won, but then it just, when things got hard, they kind of reverted back to some of those habits of, well, we usually lose. And I'm like, girl, we were up. Like, let's go. So then it was amazing to be able to, one, beat those teams for the first time for those girls, and then overcome. And then they're watching film. They're like, we should have won. And I'm like, I know. But it was like changing that mentality to, them believing what I'm telling them and believing that we can win, and not just like, oh, coach says we can win every game. No, we can be competitive every single game. It's just having that competitive edge.
When you mention culture, and I feel like this is such a buzzword now, how and what does the day in, day out of creating a culture actually look like? What sorts of things are you implementing in your program that's helping sort of build that culture, build that sort of positive mindset, that belief in the team? How do you do that?
So immediately it's connection. The way I lead is with connection and getting to know the girls a little bit more outside of them just as a basketball player. One of the things that I do is, while we're doing our dynamic stretches, I don't stand on the sidelines and just, whatever, look at my practice plan. That's all done before. I go through the lines and I just walk with them. They're doing their stretches, and ask them how their day was. Ask them, some of them will reveal, oh, I didn't do so great on my test. And so I know like that might be a tougher day. Or, ask them like their roses and thorns, like something good that happened, something tough that happened, just to get an insight of where their head is at before, we start practice. And so something we're going to be implementing this year is really getting that mindset shift too. So not only like the connection, but like, let's make sure we're here. Let's be where our feet are. Let's be present with what we're doing. Let's leave everything outside so that we can have a great practice and make it the most efficient practice.
Yeah, I think culture is one of the hardest things to create, but I think, you mentioned creating relationships and how important that is, and how that basically leads sort of your culture, your climate of your team. Can you talk about how you create that with your coaches as well?
So I'm very blessed and lucky to not only have coaches that are different than me, but also people that have been in my life for a long time. I have both two coaches that have played in my club program, and I've coached since they were in 4th grade. I'd love to embarrass one of them about that because I got all the pictures. I have another coach on staff who I've known through basketball for years and years and years. And so it's great to be able to work together. And the way I bring my coaches together is I say, we are the strongest team out here. And so when we're strong as coaches and we're united, we're going to bring that to our whole team with the girls so that we're all strong. So whether we agree, disagree, the disagreements aren't in front of the girls. There's no infighting in front of kids, that breaks down. That's a breakdown in culture, because then the kids are like, well, we don't know who to listen to.
Right.
So really making sure we have those honest, open conversations, receiving feedback. I want feedback from my coaches just the same way I give feedback to my coaches. And the same thing with my players. If you have something, let me know. I can only be better if you tell me what's going on. So it's definitely that, and being honest, and it's that trust. So it does take me time to vet people and get to know them, because we spend a considerable amount of time together, and I'm lucky to have a staff that we're friends.
That's so cool. And I think, you mentioned having those hard conversations even at the coaching level. And I think that's where your culture starts, right? It starts from your coaches. And a lot of times as an assistant, right, we think, what should we say? What can we say? But I think a really good staff, everybody can be honest with each other. And that's where, everybody grows. And that's the head of the culture. And so keeping that strong, I know is something that helps success. So let me ask you this. You've been at the high school level for your entire career. Have you coached anywhere other than high school?
Aside from club, youth club. So, I've done 4th grade on up. So basically it's 4th to 12th grade is where I've coached.
Do you have an interest of coaching at a different level?
No.
No.
I love high school. I think high school is so special. And, you know, you have a bunch of old heads like, oh, high school is the best time of your life. You know, like we grew up hearing that too from adults. And whether it is the best time of your life or not, there's just something special to it.
Yeah, I do think that you can make a really big impression. It's still an age where you can really have an impact.
Definitely.
And so I guess tell me, what is your most favorite part about being a high school coach?
I think it's just going back to like the community and, you know, the fun part of it. Like Notre Dame's really fun. Notre Dame is that high school experience that you see on TV. You know, it's very peppy. We got the football games, we got the pep rallies, you know, you come to the basketball games, they're fun. You know, it's a thing to do. It's not just like, oh, the basketball team's playing, that's cool. Like they want to come to games and, you know, be able to interact. And that was definitely something that last year when I came to Notre Dame, the girls on my team were being approached by teachers and they're like, oh my God, all these teachers I didn't know were just like congratulating us and doing all, and they, you know what I mean? So they got to feel that buzz that they didn't really feel before.
Yeah.
Maybe they did on the boys' side. So that's been something big, and even just coming in and having a great relationship with Coach Sargent and making sure to bring our teams together as a whole basketball program. So I'm glad he's been flexible. We've done like icebreakers with the boys team, you know, and stuff like that. And it's good to get to know each other.
Do you ever use any of the like JV boys or the Frostoff boys to practice against your varsity team?
We have a little. It's something we're hoping to expand this year. You know, and not all the time, right? Because it gets to be a lot of people. But especially during league, like, you know, I'm open to having like some tryouts, like some scout team tryouts of the kids that are already on, you know, Frosh or JV and like, you know, position wise, because thankfully I do have coaches that sometimes step in and like if they need to be, you know, the scout player, they can do that.
Right.
But I've been thinking about that, and Coach Nat actually brought that. She's like, I think we really need to do it. So it's something we're looking to expand this year.
I did that, or Drucker, my high school coach, did that a lot when I was in high school, and I loved it because I would talk so much shit to all the guys after I'd bust their ass. Like, it was the best. But it made practice competitive. You're playing against players that are a little bit faster than you, a little bit stronger than you. So I do think that there's value to that.
For sure. And we get, as girls and women, we get a little more competitive when the guys in there are someone different that's not there every single day.
Right. So now we're in off season. What does your off season schedule look like for your team? How big is development within that? Are you guys doing individual sessions? Are you doing small group workouts? Are you having some team practices? I know you said, you know, you're doing some club stuff as well, but talk to me about what your off-season sort of plan typically looks like and what you focus on.
So, you know, the past season, we were very fortunate to go so far in the playoffs that we didn't really do as much in the spring, plus I graduated a bunch of girls. So it was a lot more light, you know, individual training type stuff. This past year, we lift. So we were in the weight room 2 to 3 times a week up until the end of the school year. And then I also hosted a couple open runs. In my opinion, there's 2 things that girls don't do as much as boys generally. They don't watch as much basketball, but that's changing, thankfully. And they don't play like pickup or, you know, free-flowing basketball, right? So I try to create situations where it's safe, you know, so we just have an open run and open it up to a couple other girls that I know in other programs, and sometimes some local college girls come, and so it gets them out of their, you know, their zone. And so I'm like teaching them like, hey, go pick up a team, you know, like how to coordinate that again in a safe environment. So we do some open runs, and then we're actually starting our summer season pretty soon. So we'll practice or play 4 to 5 times a week. So we run a heavy June. We're off in July. Most of them girls are playing club. But in the off season, even for me, like my professional development is culture, reading, you know, talking to people, and like always looking at ways that I can improve the culture of our team and the leaders and things of that nature.
So last year you mentioned that you graduated 10 players. So what is your biggest goal for the players that you have within your program to take with them, you know, whether they play at the next level or don't play? Like, what is your goal for them to leave the program with?
So I have a lot of conversations with a lot of the girls is about like legacy. When you leave here, what do you want your legacy to be? Right? Do you want to be the hardest worker? Do you want to be the most vocal? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I try to frame those questions when they're young. And sometimes when you're a freshman, you're like, okay, gosh, whatever, because they don't realize how quickly 4 years goes by. And so we talk about that and the kind of person that they want to be. And I constantly talk to them about connection and things of that nature. And so, some girls want to go play college. Some girls aren't sure. Some girls just want to have a good high school experience. So it's being able to help all of the girls reach their goals, because we all have different goals, and making sure we're challenging everybody in that way so that I can help them get there.
If you had to, I guess you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to. We could exit this out. But if you had to choose your favorite player that you've ever worked with, who would it be and why?
I've had a lot of favorite players for different reasons, right? Like you have some of those like gritty, hard-nosed players that can sometimes be a pain in the ass to other players, but as a coach, you're just like, get them, And then you have like the kids that are just such great leaders, right? And you have the unselfish players. I had a player last year, didn't play very much, but was just the best teammate and the best kid. And, she ended up having a great year this year and she was patient and she put in the work and she never sulked and put her head down, those are all of our favorite players, right?
Right.
The ones that just work hard, do what you ask without any attitude, just give you the yes coach and are great people to be around. Like those are the favorites.
That is the best political answer that you could have possibly given. That was perfect.
Thank you.
One of the things that come up, though, when I think about coaching is, you mentioned this earlier about making mistakes along the way, wishing you knew what you knew, now then. What do you think has been the biggest sort of mistake or thing that you've learned from as your time coaching?
That's a really tough question.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
I know, really. I think back to times back in my club days when I was, 19, 20 and coaching 10, 11-year-old boys. And, sometimes maybe it's just how you phrase things or, you misspoke, right, about something. And so there's certainly like those regrets. There's regrets maybe after a season or after a game, whatever it is, whatever level, where you're like, oh, I should have done X, Y, and Z. I could have done more. And that's even just watching film. Like, yes, we're looking at scout. We're looking at this. I'm also looking at like, what did I do wrong and what did I do right? Try not to just beat up on myself. And there's times where I'll watch a game back and I'm like, oh, should have called a timeout there a little bit sooner. Or, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, call timeout. And I call a timeout in the game and I was like, that was a good timeout, So whatever it is. Right. So it's always just, it's not getting offended, or just being too hard on ourselves because we make mistakes all the time, right? Yep. As people, as coaches. And it's taking ownership of it. And I really do try and take, lead the way that, I mirror the behavior that I want to see.
Right.
Right. So whether it's taking accountability, and I love it when the players are able to do that. I'm like, okay, we're on the right track.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I struggle with is the small moments. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some of those, and we all as coaches have those moments where you wish you would have explained something a little bit better or an in-game adjustment that you made too late or whatever. And those are the moments that I think really stick with you. Mm-hmm. But one thing you mentioned was film and how you use that to sort of help you. How do you implement film within, your team setting with your coaches? How are you watching film? What's important for you to discuss and talk about with, your players or your staff?
Mm-hmm. So film for me has definitely been like a progression over the past few years. Even working with Ryan at Shellhevet, he is maniacal. I'm sure you heard him.
Yes.
And he's not exaggerating when he's talking about like his wife hearing the squeaky shoes. Yep. Like, it's true. And there are times, I reach out, hey, can you watch this? Tell me what you see. So in terms of like the progression and growth of that, I think, for kids, we're trying to teach them how to watch film, right? Because I was in high school. I remember when I'd watch film, I'm like, oh, why did I look like that? Like, why? But that's not what we're watching. We're not watching your body gestures.
Right.
We're watching, like, what are you doing, And so kind of getting past the giggles that sometimes happen when they're first watching themselves, like, why did I do that? And actually, like, no, this is what we're looking at, right? So trying to teach them, and I'll do individual film, too, as much as I can, where now we're just watching specifically you and things you could have done, things you missed, whatever it is. And then there's times we're watching it, as a whole. And so being able to like clip those things and break things down. But I also sometimes like to watch in spans so that they can watch the flow of a game, because certainly we can clip everything, but you don't understand flow as a player if you're just watching clips.
Right.
Because I think that's the highlight culture we're in. You're just watching clips. But there's so much that happens in between those highlights, those lowlights, whatever it is. And so even with my coaches in terms of growth, we had a meeting, I think a month ago, our end of the year meeting. And one of them was like, you know what? During league, Sundays, we're coming to my place, we're watching film. Like we are going to sit down as a group and consistently do that.
Yeah.
Kind of the way football does that, although they're preparing for their one game, we're preparing for our multiples. But
Right.
but those are things that, I walk around campus and I see the football teams do that. And I'm like, yeah, I need to do that. So just continuing to find ways to grow because there's so much area to grow within film. And it's so helpful.
When you talk about watching film with your players, have you experienced a certain amount of time that you feel like, hey, this is like the right amount of time to watch film? Hey, this may be too long of a period of time to watch film. What is that sweet spot for you?
I think about 30-ish minutes, especially at high school. Like, they have so many things going on, right? In college it's different. You can dedicate a certain amount of time. So it really is like, if we have a 2-hour practice, depending on, where we are in the season, we might do the film after for a specific reason. We're looking at something because we practiced right after school and that's when the gym was available,
Yeah.
But I try to watch film before practice as much as possible because I think it gets our minds into that space of like, this is what we're doing versus like you're just hearing me tell you what to do all the time. So I would say 30 minutes. We've done longer, so it is a little bit trial by error, and sometimes maybe we'll have like a team meeting about something and then watch a little bit of film. But to answer your question about 30.
About 30.
Yeah.
So if I were to come to just the on-court portion of a practice that you held, obviously I know it depends if, it's before a game day, but, generally, what could I expect if I were to come watch a practice?
So in terms of like the consistent things that we always do, we always, start with like making sure we're talking to the girls. Right, so having the coaches spread out, saying hello. Coach Nat is great about high-fiving every single, the touch.
Right,
every single
touch.
kid, exactly, when you walk in. And so we'll have our dynamic stretches. After our dynamic stretches, at that point, we might go into like what our prep is for that week, like what our focus is. I want to incorporate more like quotes. That's something that I live by and, getting the girls used to that. Then we start with what we call our vitamins. Our daily vitamins. So, we have like a defensive section, so it's doing that consistently and making sure we're not just doing the same thing all the time because what happens? You tend to cut drills a little bit or you're not going as hard when it's so predictable.
Right.
So still having like the consistency of what we're doing, transition is a vitamin we do, but adding things so you have to stay on your toes. Occasionally we like to throw in like an icebreaker in the beginning of the day. Again, it depends where we are, but doing something fun can be basketball related, can be athletic related. Sometimes it's just a little bit like just to loosen us up around finals, for example.
Right.
Things like that. I do a lot of skill work in the beginning of practice after our vitamins and whatever particular breakdown we need to do. And then we usually end with, defense, team stuff, things of that nature.
So, and this may be early to ask, but what do you foresee your expectations being for this upcoming season? Have you already set those? I know we're still in summer and you don't have your full roster,
right.
But with the returning pieces that you have and maybe some pieces that are coming in, what sort of expectations do you have for your team?
So again, without the new pieces yet, whether it be freshmen or anything like that, one thing we talked about at the end of our season was we didn't make playoffs last year. We were essentially like 2 games shy of making playoffs, and injuries were a factor last year. Yes, yes, yes. However, I made it clear in the locker room, like, this was not successful. This is the only time this is going to happen. Our expectation is to make playoffs and make a run. So you go from making 1 game short of a state championship game to not making playoffs, and then I'm like, have so much time on my hands. I'm like, okay. So even in the coaches meeting, I'm like, where are our blind spots? What do we need to do to be better? So really breaking that down and setting that expectation. And more so, not just like, the end goal might be to win, whatever that means, right? Mm-hmm. But the in-between is like building those habits and having that elite mentality and that championship mentality to get you to where you want to go.
I guess this kind of will segue into my next question, but as a coach, I think one of the biggest things is balance, finding time to have your own life outside of coaching. How do you do that? Because I know that's something that I really struggle with, is setting boundaries. How do you do that within your day-to-day life?
I guess I look at, the full year, right? Like the basketball season. So balance is something that's very important to me in my life and also my teams. And so anytime that comes through and the girls understand that that's a big part of me, it makes me like, okay, they got that message. But in terms of as an individual, the way I look at it is like during season, I might not have that much balance. And that's just kind of okay. Like I look at it like there are times you're going to grind, and then there are times where you can be more balanced. And so making sure to be more present in your life with your family and your friends and things of that nature. So even during season, it's not like I'm just either in the gym or at home. I still try to make sure I'm visiting family and not neglecting people that I love and things of that nature. Right. So it's just kind of taking the week by week and being like, okay, this is a really tough week. I got to lock in and focus. But next week I'll make sure on a Sunday where, right, mandated no basketball, I'm not just watching film and, but I'm having the time with family and friends.
Yeah. I think all coaches are a little crazy to an extent because you dedicate so much of your time to other people's journey and being a part of a team and trying to help them grow. And so finding that balance, I know, is huge. And obviously we can do that better at certain times of the year than others. But that kind of leads me, what is the most enjoyable part about being a coach?
I think it's leaving the impact on your players. A couple weeks ago, I got invited to a graduation party for a girl that I coached when she was 10, 10 to 13, and she just graduated law school.
Oh, wow.
Or, being invited to players that I've coached, like their baby showers, for their families, or their weddings, or, things of that nature. So it's still being able to make like such an impact and have a strong relationship. Like that's what I love about it. And even if some, I just see them from afar, and Instagram's so great to be able to like see people. And right. I ran into a player that I had lost contact with at the doctor's office. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm so happy to see them, because it was someone, you spend so much time with players sometimes for years and you get to know them. So for me, it's fun to see them grow and mature and then become adults and see where they're in their lives.
Last question that I have for you. If I was an aspiring coach, or for any aspiring coaches that are looking to, get in the industry of coaching, what advice would you give to them?
Ask questions. And what I mean by that is if there's a coach that you're looking at and you're like, oh, I really like the way, their style, or I've seen this coach, they're super successful. I have coaches that come to my practice, call me and say, hey, coach, can I come watch practice? My gym is open to coaches. I am open to coaches. So I suggest I talk to different kids that are in college and they want to get into coaching. I'm like, call somebody and ask if you can take them to coffee, and have kind of an informational interview. How did you get into this? And kind of pick someone's brain. I think people are afraid to ask other people because they're afraid of rejection. But I think if you actually do ask the questions, a lot of us coaches are really open to helping. And, even I look at part of my job is, yes, I'm mentoring the kids I coach, but I'm also mentoring young coaches that they all have different goals. Some might want to be a head coach one day. Some might want to be the best assistant coach, whatever it is, and being open to them and including them. Like, hey, if someone says, Sean, I want to be a head coach and you're on my staff, I'm going to include you on emails. Like, hey, this situation happened. This is how I handled it. Doesn't mean that's how you have to do it. But I try to give as much information as you want. If you're like, hey, now I just want to be an assistant, I'm like, cool. This is where we can go. So just being able to ask questions and don't be afraid of the no, and you miss out on what could be a really great opportunity.
That's such a good point, and that's something I wish I did when I was, first starting, was reach out to my connections.
Mm-hmm.
I think, especially in this industry, your connections are invaluable. Every job, for the most part, that I've obtained was through a connection.
Yeah, same.
Of some sort. Mm-hmm. Anybody that I've hired on a staff has been through somebody that I met along my way. So there's so much value in having, a good network, staying in touch with your former coaches or people that you've come across with, and it being also a genuine connection, right? Not just only reaching out when you need something, but also always touching base and checking in. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Before we go, I want you to, for anybody that's interested in learning more about you or learning more about the program, if you could tell them where they could find more information about you. So maybe your social media, maybe the program's social media, and that way, anybody that's interested can follow your journey.
Yeah. So on Instagram, our team account is Notre Dame WBB. I also have my own coaching account at Coach Jena 55, Jena with one N.
Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and I'm excited for people to hear all of the gems that you shared today.
This is awesome. Thanks for having me.